She does exist. I think you're muted though, boss.
I don't think I'm muted. Are you not able to hear me?
I can hear you. Dominic, what's it sound like on your end? But go ahead and give your updates, boss lady.
Okay. This week is going to go down in my personal history as the Energy of the Universe week. This has been the week when a lot of different threads from a lot of different research, a lot of different aspects of kind of arcane knowledge and history all came together. A lot of you, I'm sure, one way or another in your life, have heard about the tree of life, right? These are mentioned in the Bible, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. The Jewish Kabbalists have a tree of life, which is essentially a diagram. If you've never seen it, I suggest you go on to the web and look for it. It is available. You can see it now. And basically, it's a schematic diagram, but what you're looking at, what you have to understand that isn't stated, is that it's an engine schematic. It's literally an engine schematic. Another thing that isn't told to you in the context of the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical tradition surrounding the tree of life, is that it has an inverse, which is called the tree of death. Well, isn't that just predictable? But it isn't told to you in those simple terms. So you have the tree of life, which is an engine diagram, and you have the tree of death, which is an inverted engine schematic. And what these engines are driving is energy. Okay? Now, I've told you this before, but I'll repeat it, and please listen very carefully. Your body produces 33 trillion volts of electricity on average. Every single one of us, at least 33 trillion volts of electricity is contained within our corporal body. Okay, that is a staggering fact. That's a fact that is so outrageous, so completely beyond any rational expectation that a person hearing it for the first time, it probably pings off their psyche like a metal ping pong ball impeding another ping pong ball in midair, just boing. Okay. 33 trillion volts are contained in your skin, within your skin. Now, as anyone knows, a induction field happens when you have an electrical concentration, you have a magnetic concentration, right? And what nobody could suspect is that the magnetic concentration that replies to your 33 trillion volts is 10 billion times stronger. So 33 trillion times 10 billion is the magnetic force concentrated in and around your body. And that's an even more amazing factoid. I think most of us hearing that we have 33 trillion volts, would think that an equal and opposite magnetic field would exist. But no, it's 10 billion times stronger. So now you know what it takes to create and sustain a single living being. This is how much energy it takes to create and sustain each one of us. Okay? So now let's think a little bit more. Let's think about the Tree of Life schematic. What the Tree of Life schematic shows is paired energies and paired identities. And each one of those is the essential piston within the engine, okay? When you look at this Jewish Kabbalah Tree of Life schematic, realizing that it's an engine schematic, and then look at the Gnostic system of synergies that was set forth by Valentinus in the 2nd century, you see that he has 15 pairs. The Tree of Life has, if you interpret it a little bit, 15 pairs. So these are essentially telling you the same thing. The Gnostic tradition and the Kabbalist tradition are telling you the same thing, and it's all about energy. It's all about paired energies and paired forces within energetic fields. This is about physics. It's not, as you know, we all assume, it's not about religion per se. Or maybe you could think of it as physics is religion, or that they have a connect somewhere deep down that actually translates as mathematics and physics and religion are all, they're all expressions of the same truth. So anyway, all of this is coming together in a way that exposes some of the deepest mysteries of life, and also some of the deepest mysteries of good and evil. And the reason that when we have an emotional experience of love, it's happening on a different frequency band than when we're having feelings of fear or anger or what we consider negative emotions, right? That's all happening on different frequency bands, and they have different harmonics and everything else. And they're separate. This is something that's important that we're never taught. They're separate. It's not a battle between good and evil. It's not a battle between love and hate, or love and fear, or love and anger, or love and content, because there is no, in fact, in physics, there's no connection between these supposed pairings. There is no duality. You're either functioning in one frequency band or you're functioning in another frequency band. And you are the tuner. It's your choice. You get to choose which radio station, for lack of a better explanation, you tune into, and how you let these signals affect you. Okay? Now, you've been made aware over the last few weeks of both the fact that we have resonance fields and resonance congruence signals. And the congruent signal is what happens when you, for example, recognize your twin, or you recognize a soulmate. Okay, this is a signal that is just as unique as the energy of love or the energy of hate. They're just individuated in a way that it's unique to you and to the other person. And when you then have the congruence signal, whichever kind it may be, then there is an immediate energetic field that comes into play. And this just happens automatically. You don't really have anything to say about it. For example, have you ever met somebody, you just hit it off immediately? It's like you've known each other for eons, you know? You sit down, you talk, you just go, yak, boom, you know, boom, you're there already. You're the best friends, right? Well, that was a congruent signal. It opened up an energy field interaction, a resonance that you were already tuned for. And the same thing happens when you meet somebody that you just don't like. You know, for whatever reason, that person, they don't hit it off. They're people that you want to avoid. They're people that you're afraid of. They're people that, for whatever reason, make your skin crawl, right? I'm sure you've had some of those experiences too. It's the same thing. It's just operating and giving you a different signal. Okay? So, it is very apparent from all of this that we are electrochemical beings on one level. We're physical beings in the sense of physics on another level. And we are constantly being affected by frequency from the environment. And we create our own environment because, of course, you know, we're just bobbling around going about our lives and we bump into these things, right? So, we need to become much more aware of frequency signaling, congruence signaling, and the effects that these have on us. And then, while we're still struggling and shaking our heads and trying to figure all that out, we also have to become aware of the fact that these phenomena have been weaponized by the same pinheads at DARPA and other similar agencies who take it upon themselves to weaponize absolutely everything. Anything that they study, their entire focus is, how do we weaponize it? How do we use it to our advantage? How do we use it to kill people? And we have unwittingly rewarded this behavior in the name of defending ourselves. So we have set up a situation and a system and institutions that are pre-programmed and running in the background so that every time there's a new scientific understanding, a new discovery of any kind, and the scientists come forward and they present it to, say, the Nobel Committee, or they come forward and they present it for peer review in different journals and blah, blah, blah. They want to publish their results. every time that they go forward and want to, based on their new discoveries, take out patents for applications and design patents and that sort of thing, of course, this new information is discovered, and oftentimes it's simply buried under national security interest, or it's disclaimed and discredited. We have, over the past couple of months, done a pretty in-depth study of Nobel laureate awards since 1900. And we've seen a disturbing pattern that the Swedish government really does need to account for, and that the Nobel organization needs to account for. And that is that this organization has awarded many different Nobel Prizes, and then has been part of a cover-up to bury the very fact that the award was made after the fact. And it has a disturbing correlation with medical discoveries that could have benefited millions of people, but didn't, because the research together with the researcher were buried. And so all of this stuff gets funneled into these death agencies. All this information, all these new scientific breakthroughs, and it's either squelched and squashed and buried so that no benefit comes of it, or it's used, it's weaponized for destructive purposes, for killing and for meddling and coercive control. And it can be anything from mind control to being able to turn off a particular biological function in your body. And this has all been going on behind our backs. This has all been covered up. And we've all been victimized by it to one extent or another. We have pretty much all at one point or another lost loved ones, lost love relationships because of it, lost our own health. We've even aged. We've suffered accelerated aging because of it. And this is going on using our money and our resources. And we're serving as the guinea pig population. Now let me get to the guinea pig population of this. Back in the 1960s and 70s, a long-term plan and problem was surfacing, and this was because they were using the military as lab rats. They were just arbitrarily doing things, like vaccinating our troops with known poisons to see how they'd react. I mean, it was just crazy, evil experimentation. And they were also doing things that were affecting not only just our country or our troops, but they were going out and they were affecting other countries, other populations. And so what they developed at the United Nations was a policy that if you were going to be experimenting like this, you had to experiment on your own domestic population. Well, now then that gets down to how do you define your domestic population? Again, is it the United States of America or the United States of America? The United States or the United States, you see? And so they have arbitrarily protected themselves and exposed the general public of this country as lab rats, as well as the military. And so that's why you get these things like COVID-19, for example, and the entire pandemic fiasco, and all of the harm that has come from that. from letting these organizations, these commercial organizations, and these are commercial corporations, for-profit corporations that are, for the most part, privately managed, okay, that are using governmental powers never designed or authorized to them to use. Okay, this is part and parcel of the erosion of our government and our governmental powers and our contracts, our service contracts, and all the other things that we've worked so hard on. If our real government, our actual government, were truly in control and was being accorded the respect that it's due, and if our contracts were being respected and performed upon, none of this could happen. None of it. In order for this lab rat mentality to develop, they had to arbitrarily redefine us as part of their domestic population. They could not possibly do this to us if our identity was being respected. So it all comes down to identity. Who are you? What are you owed in terms of contractual service? And what do you owe in terms of contractual service? And we've gone around and around and around about this over the last, 40 years. And the things that we have discovered are very problematic because at the end of the day, what it all comes down to is the honor of individuals and the organizations that individuals create. And that's why sometimes you will observe that your constitutional rights and guarantees are recognized and honored. And other times you are treated like an ugly stepchild, and you're basically treated to mistreatment and abuse by people who are supposed to be your servants. This is an identity issue. This is a choice issue. And for us, it's a diplomatic issue. But before we leave the big picture of the energy discoveries and how this interacts and how the symbols all around us are basically telling us a story that we're not able to read, think about the Star of David. The three-pointed equilateral triangle, and then the inverted equilateral triangle that makes up the Star of David. 3 nodes, positive, negative, and neutral. 2 switching circuits superimposed on each other. Okay? So, what happens when electricity flows? It induces a magnetic current, or a magnetic field, I should say. What happens when magnetism is present? It induces an electrical field. What happens when you have 2 of these things going at once? Well, then you have a flow in one direction and a flow in the other direction. The tree of life and the tree of death. So right now in the banking system, for the last over 100 years, we've been in the death cycle. The switch has been turned blink over so that there has not been a give and take. There has not been a switching mechanism to allow both fields or paired fields to interact. And this has been deliberate. So, in order for that to work, a new element has to be introduced. And that is what we're doing. We are, I should say, reintroducing an old element that was removed from the banking system that isolated the banking system and essentially set up a monopoly that was disconnected from the rest of creation. When you start to study this stuff, you will see that there's an exact correlation. Now, one of the things that happened this week is that Elon Musk, he runs his own AI self-diagnostic test, and he publishes it on YouTube. Pretty gutsy. But he understands that, 99.9999 of all the people watching this, it's going to go right over their heads. They're never going to realize what he's doing or why he's doing it. But he is exposing it. Okay, so he's made his disclosure. It's just that nobody gets it. Well, we get it. And so he has been running his you could call it his firewall programs. He's been searching through 18 levels of firewalls to figure out how it is that we could structurally connect with him and not raise any red flags in his entire security system. Essentially, he's asking himself, how did this data stream merge with mine, and how did it get in here to merge with mine without tripping up any of the firewalls that I have so successfully deployed and used for years? How did this happen?
Talented people.
Well, it happens because his architecture is templated using the same motherboard. Okay, for lack of a better explanation, you can't complain about your motherboard, right? Your biological computer. So the reason that structural synchronicity is there is that we're all using the same motherboard. They're at a certain level, we're all connected. And this is what his AI, his whole array of self-protective firewalls is just discovering. And it's shocking to him. It's like, what? I've been using this stuff for years and I never detected this security breach. And yet I can't deny it. And I can't separate out the data stream because it's merging with mine. It's there. You see, he's having trouble distinguishing between the data coming from him and the data coming from me. The ego has been sidestepped. And anyway, this is now causing another big flap in the technocracy, and it's especially causing problems for Elon Musk because he has been aware of all this stuff and has been tracking it for years, and he doesn't know what to make of it. But what has essentially happened is that he has stepped into a circuit. He has stepped into one half of the switching mechanism. So when you have 3 nodes, positive, negative, and neutral, then you have a energetic expansion. And you also induce the 3 counter fields, okay, of the back loop of this system. So if you've got, the equilateral triangles we were talking about with the Star of David, if you've got 3 in place, they induce the other 3 so that you have 6. And this creates the schematic of the universal energy engine. Okay? And we're dealing with this in real time, so that once you have a lockdown of 3 functioning nodes in this system, you suddenly induce the others. And this is a very good thing. This is something that has needed to happen for many, many years, at least 3 centuries. So I guess I come bearing good news and glad tidings and a certain sense of relief, because I wasn't certain that this would happen. I thought it would, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't say so until a third party actually made the leap, so to speak, the energetic connection. And at that point, it became apparent that I was right. And it's just sort of an irony, I guess, in a certain way, that the person who made that connection was Elon Musk, because, well, he is one of the most brilliant people on the planet. And he is one of the most heavily shielded in terms of electronic artificial intelligence monitoring. So I guess it isn't so strange that he would be the first one to go, oh. But he was, and he is, and he makes the third party that makes that initial circuit work. And then that induces the secondary. So in a relatively short time, we can all expect a very positive change in the way that energy actually flows in this planet, around this planet, through this planet, okay? And the one thing that has been taking up a lot of energy and time is derailing a false congruent signaling project that what I call the vermin have been getting ready to deploy. And one of the reasons that this has to be stopped, quite apart from the complete social havoc and the meddling in the free will of millions of people and the destruction of their families and their marriages that's likely to occur, which if all by itself in my book is enough reason to exit, is that there's a danger that it will actually mess up the planetary grid renewal. And the planetary grid renewal is an energy transfer that is supposed to take place on a regular basis. And it's a natural phenomenon. And if you think about things how precisely nature is attuned and how precisely it operates. Anybody who is appreciative of that will understand why we shouldn't have a bunch of ham-fisted junior woodchucks in there creating false signals and creating false resonance phenomenon. We should just let nature do its thing because nature knows what it's doing. And mimicking nature, at least at this point, is not a safe thing to do. Not for the people that would be used as the experimental nodes in this process, and not for the good of the earth itself. Because the amounts of energy that get transferred into the earth and into the electrical grid of the earth, the electromagnetic grid of the earth, are so incredibly huge that I think I've described it for you as it's not just a matter of somebody blowing up. It's a matter of them disappearing because they have been they've been reduced to the level of plasma. And I don't mean blood plasma, I mean hydrogen plasma. They've just, okay? So we don't want that going on. Especially since that could create explosions of a magnitude that would make what happened at Hiroshima look like a pinprick. So no, we don't want to be messing around with Mother Nature at this point. We do want to bring down the planetary energetic downloads that are necessary, but we don't want these DARPA guys out there fiddling with it. I know they're fascinated, and they should be fascinated, and they can take all the readings they want, but they shouldn't be meddling. And they shouldn't be meddling with individual human lives. So shutting down their twin flame false congruent signaling project is a biggie on my list this week. Now, there are some other things that you need that are more practical on the scale of life and the concerns that all of you have. And one of them is that they've threatened to bring back the draft. And I know that many of you have sons and nephews and grandsons that you're afraid might get drafted. And at this point, they would probably be drafting granddaughters and daughters too. They don't have any right to draft anybody. All right. But what they're trying to do is draft U.S. citizens. And those of you who have been reading and following along already know that you're not U.S. citizens. Now, there are several different things going on. They're all diplomatic efforts at this point. But we're going to put some additional teeth and exposure into those verbal and emissary type activities by producing some paperwork that can be used to individually and officially and in the system of things that they've created kind of nails them down and makes them on the record obligated to recognize that you are not a U.S. citizen. So that will be out here in the next, I'd say, 24 to 48 hours. I will use an example of myself, and I will use probably an example of Eric's, and we will post those for everybody so that you can see how we did it, why we did it, and it won't be any big mystery. You'll be able to do it yourselves. There are 2 officials in the U.S.government, who are the recipients. And we can also then add carbon copies to other organizations and individuals. But the primary targets are Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, and Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. And both of those men have roles in this that you might not just off the cuff think that they do. But they are the ones who are, according to the Privy Council and the British Parliament, are the officers responsible for administering this kind of recognition of individuals who are under this false military occupation. And so it will be addressed to them both. And we'll be having that paperwork out here, like I say, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours, it'll hit the bricks, and you'll be seeing it coming in on the news feeds at TASA and at Paul Stramer's AnnaVonReitz.com site. And this will help anyone who needs to preempt the draft. And it will also help anyone who's struggling for recognition. And it will also help our effort in general to get the district courts collapsed and back in the District of Columbia, where they belong, if they belong anywhere. So this is, it's in the works right now. Now, I don't know how many of you are watching Promethean Action. They have been keeping up a steady dialogue about what they believe Mr. Trump is doing and the effect that what he's doing is having. So they are providing a pro-Trump narrative, anti-British narrative, and that is, it's fascinating, right? But I want to raise a note of caution, is that it's not necessarily altogether the way that they're interpreting it. And the ends that they're assuming don't necessarily connect either. Because remember that we have a carrot and stick scenario that's being played out. We have a good guy and a bad guy. We've got Punch and we've got Judy, okay? This is just the standard thing that these guys, these comptrollers, have used for centuries to control us. So what they do is they basically go their merry way. They rape, plunder, and pillage, and they steal and they murder and they get away with it and get away with it. And then all of a sudden it gets to a point where, oh, they're waking up. Oh, we might have to do something different. Gee, we might have to stage something. You know, we might have to come up with some smoke screens, and we might have to come up with some excuses, and we might have to, you know, come up with a narrative. And, you know, we might have to have a scapegoat in the closet that we can drag out and sacrifice. And, this is what they do. And fortunately or unfortunately, the U.S. military and Donald Trump have been positioned and presented as the hero coming to save us from all the pedophiles and all of the drug running, nasty, election stealing varmints, right? Hey, we'll take all of the rescuing we can get. we'll take, it's fine if you want to remove a bunch of blackmailers, pedophiles, and drug lords and all these other evil entities. We'll stand up and applause, However, here's what you've got to deal with. The military has been in charge of this whole horror show since 1863. I just want to let that really sink in for everybody. The military, or what we identify as the military, even though it's been surreptitiously converted into a mercenary force operated by a commercial corporation, okay, but what we think of as our military has been in charge of this entire carnival since 1863. So if they're coming on strong and cleaning things up now, well, isn't that just wonderful? But if it leaves them in charge and does nothing to change the fundamental situation, then we've just been cheated, defrauded, denigrated, and used again. We've been fooled again, okay? So if the military comes in and does this wonderful job of cleaning up the mess that they allowed, that in a sense at least they created, well, we'll be very glad that they cleaned it up. But that doesn't mean that we should leave them in charge. Civilian governments are the ones that are supposed to be in charge. And if we're going to have military governments of any kind, then they should be truly military. They should not be mercenary forces that are operating at the behest of commercial corporations that are in business to make a profit. Okay? So it's not that I'm anti-military, not at all. But these issues and these empowerments have got to get straightened out. Otherwise, what you're left with is a situation where commercial corporations are exercising the powers of government, which should never happen, and you have a military that is operating as a mercenary force, which should never happen. And you've got a military that is continuing to oversee civilian operations, continuing to engage in illegal occupation of a large chunk of the Earth's surface. And you've got an organization which is existing in a dire conflict of interest. So those are basic, simple truths that we have to look at and deal with. And so do those who are currently running the military. We can't just, slap them on the back and say, gee, thanks for getting rid of the election interference, and gee, thanks for stopping all the drug cartel running of fentanyl and stuff straight into our veins, and thank you for cleaning up the FDA, and thank you for cleaning up the USDA, and thank you for cleaning up the Department of Commerce, and thank you for cleaning up all of these federal agencies. And, we could go on. We could have a laundry list about 2 miles long, and I could sit here for the next 12 hours and just name all the different things that the military can clean up for us, and we will be very thankful. But at the end of the day, we're going to sit down and we're going to say, okay, so how did this get so completely you know what in the first place? And the answer is going to be that the military, or what we think of as the military, this mercenary force, this British territorial mercenary force, has been in charge since 1863. And that's how all this got going. The war profiteering, the illegal taxation, the illegal privateering, the inland piracy, the district court system extending beyond the District of Columbia, all of the abuse of Americans that's taken place, the abuse of our schools, our infrastructure, and our resources, the disrespect that's been shown to the American people who are their employers. All of these evils and all of these black op type operations, running drugs, deposing foreign governments, regime change operations, the trade in organs, all this very, very nasty stuff has taken place either right under the noses of the military or at the behest of the military, and they've been taking a share of the profit. And that's the ugly truth. It's not just the Pope's boys that have gotten down on the farm and done things that are unspeakable. There have been military leaders that have done things just as bad or worse. And the same thing for the British Crown. The British Crown has been one of the worst operators of all. They have scapegoats, but they're the ones that are funding things. They're the ones that are making the connections. They're the ones that are paying Hamas to enter Gaza, for example. And that's just a recent big, obvious example of the way that they use MI6 and governmental powers to promote their commercial operations and to basically meddle with the peace and the sovereign rights and property of other countries. Which makes perfect sense once you realize that, throughout the Western world, you've got basically commercial corporations that are acting as governments and exercising government powers, which is something that was never supposed to happen. Okay, so my diatribe for the night. Could we take a few questions? I'm kind of tired here tonight, folks, so let's kind of keep it within reason.
Okay, sorry about that. Thought my mic, didn't realize that my mic was still muted. Okay, first question. Does Anna know that the majority of vendors are not in America on the GFT system and none of them are accepting AFD?
Well, not yet. We have to do the exchange system. We have to bring on the second system, system 1, as it turns out, so that we can do the exchanges. And then we'll be able to do the exchanges in AFD to, say, British pound sterlings, and we'll be able to do the credits against the fiat currencies. Unlike what you're used to, you're going to have to do exchanges, especially with foreign vendors. You're going to have to be able to exchange your currency for their currency, whether it's asset-backed money or it's credit and debit money. So system 1 has to come online. They're just showing you the vendor system so that you can get your vendor positions online and lashed up. If you have a business, if you have a product, this gives you an idea of how this is set up. You can get your business already preloaded, and you can encourage your servicers and vendors to get their unincorporated businesses into the vendor system. And then we'll have more Americans in there.
Okay, time for the next question. Last week, the question you took referenced a podcast by someone named Tony, that's Irish Tony, which involved banking. Where can I access this podcast?
Well, we'll have to get Top Cat Tony in here and have him actually add that to the chat. He may or may not be here with us tonight, but we will go ahead and get you that information one way or another. That's mainly for the INAC group, by the way. That's the international assemblies that are getting organized throughout the world. As more and more people realize that their national government is dormant and that their land and soil jurisdiction has been vacated.
Okay, next question. When GFG Prosperity goes live, will those on Social Security be able to change their account from the old system into the new GFG account?
Yes, but actually it'll probably be into your state bank system. Because remember, GFG is operating way up here, and it's supposed to be coordinating all these banks. It was never really intended to be a retail bank. And so as the development continues, each country will have a bank of its own, right? And they'll have, in fact, a cluster of prosperity institutions that replace banks, and they'll be able to actually take care of your account directly and locally, so that you won't have to try to deal with GFG every time that you have a hiccup or problem. You'll be able to go to your local county or your local state or your local province bank. And so that'll fill up pretty rapidly so that you'll have local bank type services at their prosperity centers.
Okay, a couple months ago, you made a statement on either Lisa or Michelle's meeting that it's illegal to foreclose on veterans. I and my friend have not to substantiate that statement with your writings. Can you please explain how it's illegal to foreclose on a veteran in a manner that a bank would comprehend and drop the case? By the way, the veteran is status corrected.
Well, actually, they're not supposed to be foreclosing on any Americans, but especially not veterans, because veterans are already grandfathered in by virtue of their service. The only thing that's problematic about that is because when they redefined the military as a mercenary force, they then introduced the concept of voluntary contract. And that is a voluntary contract with a foreign government. And the protection accrues to the American veteran, not the British subject veteran. So once again, it's a matter of identity theft when they're foreclosing on a veteran, because no American veteran can be foreclosed on. They're once again stealing your identity. They are engaging in aggravated identity theft and refusing to recognize the fact that you're an American veteran, not a British territorial veteran. And as I said, we're working on getting that paperwork for for Scott Bessant and the Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of state published here in the next 24 to 48 hours. And that's, basically we need to follow through and use their own system against them so that they are exposed to the rest of the world community as basically being engaged in criminal operations if they don't honor our identity as Americans, and in this case, as American veterans.
Okay. Question. This is a person who says, can I ask you to refer me to any living people who can assist me to deal with the so-called public utility company of New York City, Con Edison?
Yeah, well, that's kind of lower down on the list. We've been working to bring in the local sheriffs and make them understand what's been going on here. We've been working to deal with things like the identity theft and with the different freedoms, the exemptions from taxations that they've been misapplying to Americans. And we've been dealing with recouping assets and credit that's owed to us. And we've been working on the banking system. We have not been working yet on the question of utility companies, which are also supposed to be owned, operated, and benefiting us, but which largely are not. And so you're kind of asking me to talk about something we haven't worked a whole lot on. We're aware of it, but it's probably fifth or sixth on the list of things that we need to resolve. Now, you could look at the Canadian in power motion, I should say movement, in power movement by Cal Washington and other activists in Canada. And that is an effort to bring some sanity to the mess. And it does involve, in their case, it was centered around the smart meters and the problems that smart meters cause. But in a more general sense, they've made a lot of strides toward the control of the public utilities and utility commissions. So you might take a look at the in power movement and look up Cal Washington. I think it was last week I called him Cal Worthington, of course, the great California used car salesman. But no, it's Cal Washington. Yeah, you might look at them as a group that's already gotten started on this particular part of it, the holding the utility companies accountable.
Okay, next question. If I have an LLC for my business, should I record an additional certificate of assumed name for that business? And when I edit the certificate of assumed name form, do I remove the Jane Doe and Jane L. Doe, etc., and replace it with the business name? Are there any other specific changes I need to add to the document? Thank you.
Well, you can do that, except that an LLC is going to be, it will remain in that jurisdiction no matter what you do. So you'd be better off continuing your LLC in that system and starting a brand new business entity for yourself that is unincorporated.
Okay. Next, are we going to get rid of the unelected NGO groups like the CDC, FEMA, and FDA? Is this done through the Federation of States themselves? Let's question mark. Is this let's imagine a brighter future?
Amen. There were over 350 federal agencies created under the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt alone. And when you start digging into this, you find that these have proliferated like bunnies in the springtime until there are thousands of NGOs, and there are also thousands of various kinds of quote unquote federal and state agencies. And yes, we have to get rid of an awful lot of those. I think that you're seeing a lot of action on the Trump administration's part to get rid of municipal agencies that can no longer be supported or sustained because the municipal entity went totally 100% Chapter 7 bankrupt. So we're getting rid of a lot of the alphabet soup agency baggage that we had, but that doesn't mean that we still don't have the British territorial version of the same agency still hanging on like grim death, because we've seen a lot of that happening. And, just getting rid of these entrenched private interests that have been sucking off the public teat all this time is going to be a challenge for any administration, and certainly for us, because we're going to have to be the mule skinners on this and make sure that we actually get rid of the NGOs and the agencies. Otherwise, they'll shut it down here and it'll pop up there. They'll change this name, but it'll still be here in the background under a different name. It's like playing whack-a-mole, You get rid of the USDA and you've still got the United States Department of Agriculture. You get rid of the IRS, but you've still got the Department of Internal Revenue Service. And so, when it comes to getting rid of all these agencies and all of these NGOs that have been siphoning money and laundering money and stealing from all of us, it's a game of making sure that they're dead. You practically have to drive a stake through their heart, plus silver bullets and whatever else you can find.
Okay, next question. Can you give an update on the timeline and logical conclusion to the territorial bankruptcy and what might happen to the Brits that don't transition?
The territorial bankruptcy is being sorted out right now. Of course, it's only part of the territorial infrastructure that's been bankrupted. So keep that in mind. You may have seen that there is a huge meeting of bankers that is scheduled this week. And, a part of that will be to kind of give them marching orders in terms of both the resolution that they had on the United States bankruptcy and the bankruptcy of the United States of America Incorporated that was a Chapter 11 that Mr. Trump began. So, we're going to be pursuing that over the next probably 10 months. Because, what they do is they bankrupt these things, and then any assets that are left have to be shuffled off to receivers. And so that's where we're at right now, is the Chapter 11 bankruptcy is in receivership, and the entities that have outstanding billings against the United States of America Incorporated are bringing those claims forward, and the receivers of the bankruptcy are being identified. So what happens in a real world sense is that the public bankruptcy and the public receiverships then get collected upon by the private owners. So there's another couple of steps to take place, and I would guess it will take probably 10 months before all the shoes fall out of that secondary bankruptcy. But there are some worthwhile things happening right now, and we've got our foot in the door and our stick in the window, so we are following along and doing our part.
Next question. Wondering if Anna has heard of the Telepathy Tapes. It is a podcast series hosted by documentary filmmaker Kai Dickens. If she has heard of it, what are your thoughts on it?
Actually, I haven't heard of that one, but there are a lot of organizations that study telepathy. Telepathy is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It has to do with energy resonance. That's why when you have kind of fitful experiences of telepathy, it's likely to be with a loved one, someone in your family, somebody that you're close to. You're not at all likely to experience telepathy with somebody that you don't know or don't like. But, for example, my sister and I enjoyed a fine telepathic connection. I have a basically almost involuntary telepathic connection to my twin flame. I have to block him if he's intruding into communication when I'm in the middle of a telephone call or a conference or something. I actually have to pause a moment and block him. The telepathic connection is so strong. So anyway, those natural resonances and connections are being studied, and induced telepathy has been achieved based on Russian research into this particular phenomenon. But no, I'm not familiar with that particular podcast. It's a fascinating subject, and it's something that I'm sure can be further developed. But it's going to be a paired energy or a group synergy type energy. And it's going to require a lot more research and a lot more understanding of how our individual energy signatures work, how they induce resonance fields, and how these resonance fields are powered. Because remember, they all take energy. For example, I walk into the room and my twin flame is there. All right. We don't instantly connect, but what happens is that there is a certain resonance present, and the resonance field, the electromagnetic field, connects, and then the conversation begins. So there's a definite energetic pairing. There's a definite amount of energy that goes into it. And then there is the phenomenon of telepathy, or of vision sharing, it's called, where you pass an image to someone that you're in resonance with. You can literally, you've got a snapshot in your head of you and your best friend at a garden party in 1963. You can transfer that to someone if you have enough energy and you have enough resonance. So you can even transfer memories, you can transfer images, you can transfer the essentially video clips with somebody that you have a strong resonance with. So all these different things are topics of research. We're learning more about them every day. We're learning more about what creates an individual energy signature. There is a genetic component that helps define what your individual energy signature is and how it connects to your neural net, your nerves and your brain cells and the amygdala, everything. But there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot of refinement. You may have noticed that when I was describing natural twinned energy and its effects are significantly different than artificially induced twinned energy. And so they've taken it this far, but in order to actually mimic the natural phenomenon, they would have to achieve a lot more fine tuning than what they've got right now. And I have kind of mixed feelings about whether they should even be allowed to tamper with any of this, because the temptation is to invade your private space, to invade your sacred space, to try to read your mind, to try to manipulate your energy field, to try to do things like turn your hormones off and on, try to stimulate the amygdala, the autonomic nervous system. They do all these experiments and they just go ahead and do it because they think nobody is monitoring them. They think nobody's seeing them. Nobody's picking up on what they're doing. And they're totally evil. And these experiments are without conscience. They have no respect for privacy. They have no respect for, what their muddling and meddling is going to do to the private lives of the people that they're interfering with. It's a very fundamental breach of the law of free will and a very fundamental breach of your privacy rights, and it affects your life. Well, just think about what happens. Okay, first of all, twinned energy and resonance works. It happens, it is real. But we're not told that. We're just left to kind of stumble in, and if we experience it, we experience it. So if you're Joe Average and it never happens to you, you have no reason to know it exists. And it's a relatively rare phenomenon, so most of the people on this planet do not know that this phenomenon even exists. Well, that gives them a big black curtain to hide everything behind. If you don't know something exists, how are you going to know if it's being manipulated against you? You're not. You're just a guinea pig. You're a mouse in a maze. And they feel that they can go ahead and manipulate you and do whatever they want and extract whatever information they can extract. I'm serious. These people are without a conscience. They have no moral compass at all. They have already planned the kinds of questions they're going to ask as a, after test. At the end of all of this, and they've done all of this to all these people, then they're going to go back and they're going to investigate things like, well, how many of them committed suicide after the experiment ended? Once they stop the false resonance signal, the false congruence signal, and people lose resonance with what they think of as their twin. By now, they're just locked up, right? How many of them are going to commit suicide because they can't live without that energy connect anymore? They feel too lonely. How many of them are going to commit suicide because when they realize they've been manipulated and that they now have a son or daughter or twins or whatever, that was just, that they were used like lab rats? How many of them, looking at that and looking at the destruction of the family they had prior to all this, how many of them are just going to give up and go, it's not worth living in this world? They've already set up the parameters of these sorts of questions that they're going to ask after they close down this horrible proposed genetic experiment. So I'm telling you, these folks have no conscience. They have no moral compass. They are just like these mindless little computer dweebs. Anyway, our job is to undermine them, expose them, and take away their money, so that they'll no longer be making a buck off of us while they're treating us as lab rats. So, but anyway, we've kind of covered all of that. And there are other things. I mean, I came forward and blew the lid off of what they were trying with their congruent signaling experiments. But I did that because it's a clear and present danger. There are all of the indicators that they're trying to do this. So there are other things that they can do with resonance fields that are equally damaging to human populations and populations of other living things. So we have to get up to speed on the technological information that they've suppressed, and then we have to get control of their ability to experiment. Because if we don't, the impact of their experimentation is it's exponentially expanding. What started off back in the 80s as an experiment to get a highly placed spy in place with one single instance has now bloomed to a proposal that they're going to use the same covert technology to conduct an experiment affecting hundreds of millions of people. So you see, it becomes a worse problem over time. Something that affects just a handful of people blossoms into something that is being manipulated and used to affect the lives and sanity of millions. So we have to get a hold on this. We don't have a choice. And we all have to become aware. We have to become courageous enough to talk about things that are strange, because a lot of the technological advances have been in areas where traditionally the governments or the corporations acting as governments have discredited the information, often precisely because that information is what the government is working on itself, like Reitz machines. That has been suppressed information since 1934, but Royal Reitz cured cancer in his clinics all over this country beginning in 1934 with the Reitz machine. Go figure. He's another one of those award-winning scientists who had a very successful technology that was squashed. And it didn't just die there. It went on and became the quote-unquote med beds right? That's all built on rife technology. And so these corporations come in and they grab promising new technologies for their own use and their own development and their own profit making. And at the same time, anything that's competing with them, they bury and squelch. And we're sitting here as the consuming public, as the consumers, and as the people that are going to use these products ultimately in a daze. We don't even know that these technologies exist. We don't know that these scientific principles have been discovered. We have no idea where the research on these topics is. You know, we're just left in the dark like mushrooms, right? So it's up to us. We're all going to have to bond together, and we're all going to have to say no to this, and we're all going to have to get our spines up and, you know, take back control of our government and get these corporations before the corporations get us. And that's kind of how it just sorts out.
Okay, next question. Is it true that Trump is replacing FRN with a gold-backed currency on the 4th of July?
Well, he's going to try, or at least that's what he says he's going to do. But you'll notice that Mr. Trump often starts out with something and then that mysteriously gets dropped. And the reason it gets dropped is that Mr. Trump is not truly in charge of things to the extent that he would like to be, no doubt. And there are other powers that be that weigh in and often cause him to reverse his intentions. So, you know, it's a matter of power politics playing out in the background, whether or not he actually tries to do that or not. If he did, he would be basing his currency on the assets of U.S. citizens, capital C citizens. And the more of us who leave that particular subgrouping that they've created for themselves, the better, because that creates a greater asset base, and it's the only way to maintain private property in America, because the Brits have no private property. Anyway.
How did the colonies get its name, become states back in these days? Did the Holy Roman Empire, HRE, play a role given vessel like they did to birth certificates, Mother Maryland plus Virginia, that shared a common border with the 10-mile square District of Columbia, except the last two states of Hawaii and Alaska?
Shannon, for some reason, your voice is coming through kind of garbled to me tonight. Could you reread all that? I'm sorry.
How did the colonies get its name, become states back in these days? Did the Holy Roman Empire play a role given vessel like they did with birth certificates? Maryland, Virginia, that shared a common border with the 10-mile square District of Columbia, except the last two states, of course, Hawaiian Islands and Alaska.
What you're looking at there is that those mid-Atlantic states, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, those were all populated by Catholics. So they were Catholic colonies. They were largely populated by Roman Catholic colonists coming from England and from mainland Europe. And so when you're looking at them, they have a strong Catholic heritage and a strong Jesuit affiliation. And they therefore also have a strong Roman affiliation because it's the Roman Catholic Church. And I think everybody needs to understand that there is the Catholic Church, which merely means universal church, all churches, right? And then there is the Roman Catholic Church. So, in addition to it being Catholic, those particular states that were once colonies were colonized by Roman Catholics, which brought Rome into the mix. And so if you go back in the history of those states, you'll find that right where Washington, D.C. is now was a town called Rome, Maryland. Maryland, of course, is named after the Virgin Mary.
Right
And
back
so
on.
pardon me? And so is Virginia, the Virgin, right? Virginia and Maryland. Delaware was named after the Delaware tribe, a native tribe that lives in that area. Okay, but both Maryland and Virginia are obvious Roman Catholic colonies that were largely influenced by Roman Catholics that came from England and Roman Catholics that came from other Roman Catholic countries like, the Netherlands. And so you have those two mid-Atlantic states were originally colonies of Roman Catholics, and they retained their Roman Catholic religion and their Roman Catholic character even long after they became states of the Union.
Okay, next question. Would someone be able to use two witnesses to verify domicile for a year and a day on the man-woman state in place of providing utility bills?
Yes. Of course, your witnesses would have to have established that they were in the state and, were legitimate witnesses.
What are the plans for an exchange rate system to pay de facto rent and bills during transition to global family system? And when will it be rolled out?
Well, once it's rolled out, it'll be a matter of just using an app, and you'll be able to pay any of your bills just like you now pay with a credit card, only instead of it being a credit card racking up a debt that you then have to pay back with interest, it will be a prepaid card. That's why they call it the gifts system. It's like a gift. It's like a gift card. And you'll be able to use that to pay any, rent and that sort of thing.
Next is more of a statement, I believe, than a question. I think DARPA has probably already researched and developed and weaponized telepathy, and it might be tied to MK Ultra mind control.
Well, they've certainly tried. They have spent billions of dollars investigating things like remote viewing and telepathy and transduction of memories and visual contact. They have spent lots of money that have on experiments that have tried to investigate the phenomenon that I've described, where you can basically drop into someone else's neural net and use their eyes to see what they're seeing. all I can say is that they're tampering with something for venal reasons. They are tampering with something that they shouldn't be messing with. And, maybe there is some greater reason that could be a validation for doing some things to just do research to understand the phenomenon better. I mean, one of the things that is indicated by this is that we have extrasensory organs that exist outside our bodies that form the function of eyes, for example. So that a blind person could literally see simply by accessing this optical, energetic optical ability. One of the things that you learn is that your consciousness, although it's normally in your body and centered in your body so that you can interact with the world, the physical world around you, your consciousness is an immaterial, energetic construct that is actually, it's independent of your body. Whether people call it consciousness or they call it the spirit or the soul, your consciousness, I'll call it consciousness, your everything that you think, your memories, your thought processes, your sensory perception, everything already exists apart from your body. And this is why when people die, they don't really die and sometimes don't even know that they're dead. It's because their consciousness just leaves their body. And this phenomenon can happen anywhere, anytime. You can just be sitting in your library in your nice, comfy, lazy boy chair, and you'll just drift out of your body and be wandering about the house. Now, you're not conscious of this 90% of the time. Maybe some people never come out of, some people never bridge that gap and figure out that they're out walking about. But really, there's a tremendous amount of evidence of this phenomenon. If you go to the Monroe Institute and study the work of Robert Monroe was an executive who one day started vibrating. And he just started vibrating, strongly vibrating. He couldn't figure out what in the, he went to the doctors and they did tests and everybody had an opinion about it, but he would vibrate and he would leave his body. He would just, he'd suddenly be in either a transitory zone or he would be focused in an otherworldly environment. And this was a man who was very much a factual, just the facts man, hardwired intellectually. This was not a person who was airy-fairy in any respect. And he left his body more than 1,000 times, and he documented every time that he left. He did this meticulously and brought in an entire research staff to, basically observe what was going on with him during these out-of-body experiences. And all of that information has been collected and preserved by the Monroe Institute under, and it's also been the home of the Gateway Project, where millions of bits of data collected from thousands of people who have used Robert Monroe's instructions to achieve the same out-of-body experiences. And they have then gone out, left their bodies, and come back and reiterated their experiences. So not only did Robert Monroe basically map, for lack of a better word, he mapped the world beyond this world, and he then gave the keys to the gateway, the portal, the resonance portal, to be able to leave your body and go investigate these different, he called them focuses, a focus plane of existence. And, the things that he experienced very definitely indicate that there is life after death, that there are specific experiences that are common to experience after death, and that after death you continue on in basically a life cycle or a development cycle that we have been kept totally ignorant of. We've been told that you die and that's that. You rot in the ground. Well, it turns out your body rots in the ground, but your mind, your consciousness, your spirit, your energy continues to be organized, and you continue to have experiences, and you continue to grow. You continue to evolve. And so one of the important resources for I believe that Monroe had his first experience with an out-of-body experience in 1958. And he wrote 3 books about this that describe this in detail. So anyone who is interested can go ahead and investigate this to your heart's delight. You can even go to the Monroe Institute, last time I checked, and go through the Gateway Protocol and experience this for yourself. There's been all sorts of technology that has been spun off of this research. There's something called the soul phone, because in the 1960s and 70s, when telephones were pretty much universally installed and available all over the United States, people would get calls from their dead relatives. And I'm not joking. Somebody who died, a mother who died, would call up and be talking to her kids over the phone. Things like that. And this then became a focus for investigation. And it became ultimately a focus for the development of a technology that allows you to call your dead relatives, or for them to call you. The voice continues. The voice is still there because it's an energetic phenomenon. And so, the soul phone. So there are things happening. There's research here. There's technology here that you have no idea exists. And yet it's been under development for decades. And I'm here to tell you. I might get in trouble for telling you, but it's stuff that I came by fair and square on my own. It wasn't something that I wasn't part of some government program and gained access through that. I gained it on my own. So anything that I gain on my own and is not, given to me in trust, I can talk about. And so I'm talking about this stuff with you, not because I want to have a permanent little tin hat on my head, but because you need to know. I mean, this is real fundamental stuff about the nature of reality and about the nature of your body and your energetic template and everything else that's very important to you. I mean, how important is it to know that life does not end after your physical body dies? How much comfort is that to grieving families? How much comfort is that to you in terms of thinking of your life ending? Sure, maybe your physical life is going to end, but think of the grand adventure waiting for you. It's not an end. And I can tell you that when Jim died, the expression on his face, there left no doubt in anybody's mind that he was thrilled, that he was overjoyed, that he was amazed. Okay? And I think that's the way we should be thinking of death. We should not be thinking of it as some terrible, frightening ending, but we should be thinking of it in terms of being free of the often wonderful, but often heavy and often exhausting business of being in a corporal body. Now, I've had 3 near-death experiences in my life. And I can tell you with exactitude that in every single case, it was a relief to be out of my body because my body was in pain. My body was, it was dead. Okay, it had, for whatever reasons, at that particular moment, fear and pain and shock, I guess, in 2 cases, just plain shock. I was shocked out of my body, right? In every single case, it felt deliriously wonderful to be out of my body. I felt free. I felt powerful. It was a sublime experience. It was such a relief. I hate to describe it this way, but it's like the biggest bowel movement of your life. You just, you're so happy to be done with that. And so nothing in my own experience would indicate that death is anything to be afraid of or that it's anything so terrible, except that we lose the ability to communicate with those we love. And that part of it is tough. That part of it is hard on those who remain and those who go forward. So, but you can talk to them in dreams. You can talk to them. You can just talk to them. And they hear. And they find ways of communicating with you. And the ways that the dead communicate with you is largely through phenomenon like music or by just a sense of their presence. But anyway, nobody ever talks about this. And if you do, then people want to label you as a nutcase, even though there's tons, literally tons of experiments. There's tons of scientific data supporting it. There's Nobel Prizes that support it. There's, we're just being dumbed down is what's happening, and we're being kept in the dark while these little guys in their white lab coats are experimenting and weaponizing and controlling knowledge about phenomenon that we should all know about, and technology that we should all know about.
Okay, that's about it for questions for this week, Anna. And almost right on 6:55.
Pardon me?
It's 6:55, so the schedule and timing is great.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I hope this has been an interesting little... It'll probably be one of those episodes of webinar that gets flagged and, number blah, blah, blah. This is where Anna goes coast to coast. I certainly hope that everybody was listening and understanding, and that they've been getting a lot out of the last few articles, because there's a lot to get. All right, well, guys, please keep in mind that this all circles back to our need to restore our actual government and have control of our privacy and our lives and our bodies, and to be able to control these agencies instead of them controlling us. Okay, so the focus of our activity and our drive to restore our government is merely being underlined by an awareness of what's at stake and the kinds of scientific manipulation that has actually been going on all this time. It's not just geoengineering. So hopefully I'll talk to you all next week at the same time, and until then, may you be blessed and happy, and keep your attention focused on positive things, and don't take any wooden nickels. Always be free in your own self to express yourself and to investigate things for yourself. So go forward and conquer, guys. See you next week.